Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios. This is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
We'd like to thank Woodbine for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Woodbine open now through December, featuring great racing, including the King's Plate coming up in August, Turf Champions Day with the Woodbine Mile in September, and much, much more. Woodbine Racing, great racing north of the border. Good morning. Welcome to Racing Across America on this Saturday morning. Seth Merrow in the studio, although I'm in the studio a couple of days ago, actually. I'm out of town this weekend, but we pre-taped because it's a big weekend, so definitely wanted to have some content out here on this Saturday morning. Looking forward to the opening weekend, the fall meet at Keeneland with some very important and nice stakes action. Also a nice stakes day in New York today. So certainly wanted to have some conversation about that. And one of the reasons I'm pre-taping is we reached out to our friend Jeremy Plonk, who does a great job handicapping throughout the Keeneland meets, spring and fall. And you can find his selections over on the Keeneland website every racing day. Jeremy, good morning.
Good morning, Seth. Good to be with you. And I guess fall is officially here in the Northeast. It's been warm, but, it's Keeneland. The leaves are changing, and football pads are popping. So this is a good time of year.
Yeah, no, it's definitely fall. Up in our area as well, the Saratoga area, warm days, but cool nights, I will say, which then leads into, as you say, the leaves changing. It's that time of year. But that means we're right around the corner from the Breeders' Cup. A lot of Breeders' Cup horses will be racing this weekend, certainly. Oh, I'll ask, did you see the race yesterday from Forever Young in Japan? I thought, he won pretty easily. I'm not sure exactly what he was facing, but the schedule this year for Forever Young makes his appearance in a few weeks in the Breeders' Cup, I think, very interesting.
Yeah, look, he ran in two big ones in the spring, right?
Yeah.
Saudi and then the Dubai World Cup, and then they kind of took the summer off. The one prep, second off the layoff, a good handicapping angle. It wasn't too taxing of a race. He did what he was supposed to do. It was a very loose and sandy, kind of beachy-looking racetrack, so he probably got a lot out of it, but being so cuppy that I'm sure that, that he was kind of getting deep into that track and probably got a lot of fitness out of it. He'll be as good as he's been the past visits here to the U.S., right? He's going to be a factor. It's just a tougher classic this year than it was last year because not only is Sierra Leone back and fierceness, but you've got a cast of 3-year-olds that are really good this year as well. So it's going to be a very tough Breeders' Cup Classic for everybody involved, but Forever Young is not without a chance for sure.
Yeah, he adds intrigue to, as you have said, what is shaping up to be, and really for a few months now, shaping up to be a really highly anticipated Breeders' Cup Classic. As you say, last year's 3-year-olds, which didn't really kind of develop until the latter portion of the year and the early portion of the 4-year-old season, but that group has turned out to be very nice. But this year's 3-year-olds, at least at the top of the class, Sovereignty, Journalism, and then with the victory a couple of weeks ago by Asa. But Bob Baffert last weekend, Nevada Beach, threw his hat into the ring as an interesting 3-year-old. I'm not sure where he will go Breeders' Cup Day, but I think the Classic is really shaping up to be a big race this year.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to like 1998 at Churchill Downs when you had, Skip Away, Silver Charm, won by the horse who was undefeated that year, and the horse of the year, and Awesome Again. It's kind of a cusp right below that, but comparable to what we saw in 2007 in Monmouth, when it was Street Sense and Curlin and all those horses matching up in there. And, of course, the ill-fated George Washington that day where the weather was so bad. We're not going to have problems with the weather at Del Mar, and it should be really one of the better classics we've seen in, 42 years of the Breeders' Cup now this year?
Yeah, I think everybody is, as I say, it's highly anticipated at this point. Let's hope everything holds together. All right, as I said, we will have some Breeders' Cup entrants come out of the stakes action at Keeneland this afternoon. We'll take a look at that. Before we do, just remind people, as I said earlier, folks can find your selections every racing day throughout the meet at the Keeneland website. But also, you're going to be back doing the YouTube, the night before YouTubes?
Yeah, we're going to do what we call the Keeneland Look Ahead podcast. It's a video podcast preview of the next day's racing. 8:30 Eastern. It premieres with the live stream, both on X, Twitter, and also on YouTube. So you can go to the Keeneland pages for both, or my page at Horse Player Now on both sites, and you can watch that live stream. If you don't catch it live, catch it in the archives. It's set to go from that point forward. But again, the live stream begins at 8:30. I go through every race on the card. We kind of look at the best betting strategies on the program, not just picks. And try to add a little bit to, how to attack the day and how to approach the next day's racing, and also give you a recap of what happened during that day's racing, to see if there are any track trends developing or connections to keep an eye on and such. So we follow the races every night, 8:30 Eastern for the next day. So, Thursday for Friday, Friday for Saturday, Saturday for Sunday will be the schedule opening weekend.
I'm usually sitting at home in front of the computer handicapping for a couple of days out, and when Keeneland runs around, I pull up your previews, and so I will highly recommend them. People should check those out. And again, the selections and analysis over on the Keeneland website as well. All right, let's jump in. Saturday action, stakes action at Keeneland starts with race number 6, the Woodford, 5.5 on the grass. I pulled up a replay going back to Saratoga. I'm a homer. I pulled up a Saratoga replay of the quick call back in July, and Governor Sam was a nice winner that day. Came back and got caught in the follow-up, the Mahoney, and then tried to stake at Kentucky Downs last time and ran third. But again, going 3 back, that nice win in the quick call. I'm hoping we get back to that for the George Weaver runner. Irad Ortiz sticks on board. Don Show's interesting. Arrest Me Red, world record for Rudy Brissett. But what did you see in the Woodford?
Well, world record's going to scratch out of this one and run Friday in the Phoenix is the word that I'm hearing from the folks at Keeneland. So we'll expect to see him on the main track Friday. Governor Sam, you're picking here. You've got the right rider. Irad Ortiz wins 30% in turf sprints at Keeneland. He and Joel Rosario are absolutely dominant in the turf sprints at Keeneland. No Rosario, he's going to stay in New York. So it's all about Ortiz on Governor Sam when you're looking at a potential rider in this spot. When it comes to trainers in turf sprints, nobody gets close to what Wesley Ward does there. He's won 26% in turf sprints at Keeneland, far and away the most turf sprint winners. He's got the one, Arrest Me Red, who I think can get a pretty good trip in here. You say, wait, the rail's not a great place to be in a turf sprint, but this is a field of 9. It's not one of those big 11, 12-horse fields. There's going to be a lot more space and room to work with in a 9-horse field. And if you look back at the past performance lines, the last 2 times this horse drew the rail, wins. At Turfway, at Keeneland, in an allowance from the turf sprint distance from the rail here during the fall meet last year. I like Arrest Me Red in this spot. Governor Sam certainly has a good shot in here because I don't think there's a lightning pace in here. I think it's pretty fast, but not crazy fast. And so I think Governor Sam's going to be much closer up than he was at Kentucky Downs last time. But I've got the one in here, Arrest Me Red. Kadeem the 8th going to be coming from the clouds. Deep closing Euro for Charlie Hills, Frankie Dettori. Dettori's done really well riding in Keeneland turf stakes over the past couple of years. So Kadeem's going to get the last call in here. I don't know if he's going to get the winning call, but he'll be flying late.
How about Dettori winning the jockey title at Kentucky Downs?
Just when everybody thought he was kind of done, right? He kind of had a pretty good little run there, and then he went ice cold. And then got it back. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Doncho in here. This is the horse who set a world record for 5.5 on the turf at Ellis Park 2 starts back. Then came and won the Hoss at Colonial Downs. He's stepping up in class, and I think he's a dirt horse who's caught a couple real top of ground turf courses. really firm that suited him. Obviously, as fast as he ran. It's 80 degrees in Lexington, Kentucky. Yeah. It hasn't been raining. It's going to be a pretty firm turf course again at Keeneland. This isn't the same kind of turf course that they have at Ellis or at Colonial. But it's going to be firmer than usual for Keeneland, so that probably helps Doncho a bit. But he ran poorly here in the fall last year on a turf course that wasn't nearly as firm as it's going to be this weekend.
Yeah, I had Governor Sam on top. I put Doncho in second, and I wasn't quite sure what to do with him, given what you said. I think he's moving up a little bit. I think this is a little bit of a saltier group than the last 2. But, man, he looked awfully good. And then I had Arrest Me Red in the 3rd spot. So I kind of agree with your thoughts, maybe just in juggled up order. But we will see. I think it's a fun bunch. And, I have mentioned this with guests a lot of times over the past couple of years maybe. But man, when these turf sprints first came out, they were a total puzzle. And now you get a race like this, a few years down the line where we have more of a, something to look at, a database to look at, as you say, referring to jockeys and trainers as well, where it's a little more palatable handicapping wise, and a race like this is fun on the turf sprint side of things.
Yeah, look, there's 18 years of this race in the database that I helped Keeneland create on their website. It's a free database people can download. You can download it to an Excel file and shuffle all the different results of every race run at Keeneland since 2006. Look for the handicappers database on the website there. We've got 18 years of this race on turf in the database. Favorites are 8 for 18. Like you mentioned, these races aren't quite the chaos that you might think. And I think when you get a field of 9 versus 12, that really changes things up. The best horse has a much better chance to win in a turf sprint when it's not a capacity field and they're kind of really, victim of the trip a long time.
All right, let's move on. Race number 7 on Saturday, the TCA Thoroughbred Club of America. 6 furlongs the distance for the fillies and mares. I pulled up a replay of Vava going back to June 21st. Needed a little confidence builder, needed to rebound after some performances that weren't necessarily Vava-like. She did here, winning again. This is going back to June. The follow-up at Charlestown may be a little bit disappointing, although the winner that day, Mystic Lake, came back and won a stake. I think it was Pennsylvania Derby Day at Parks. So that maybe validated the situation there a little bit. But Vava is very interesting to me. I put Zeitlos on top. I think this one more of a dirt runner, although the last couple of races on the turf, I like the horse two back in the race up at Saratoga and ran a good second on the turf. But I think getting back to dirt, Zeitlos is interesting. Vava, Vodka with the twist, Long Neck Paula for Wesley Ward. But what did you see in the TCA?
Zeitlos is the defending champion in the race. It's going to be coming from pretty far back in here, and you typically don't want to be closing in 6 furlong races at Keeneland, but it worked for her in this race last year when they went 21-2, 44. Where does the pace come from this year? Probably, Prang's got some speed, Long Neck Paula down to the inside. Vodka with a twist may show some pace. So I think they're going to go quick enough in here to give Zeitlos a good shot. You get Pratt, and again, those turf races, I don't think that's her game. I think she is better on the dirt, and I think she'll be a big factor in here. Look, she's won for her last 5. Bob was won for her last 5. Long Neck Paula hasn't won much lately. She's won for her last 5. This is a race where I just put Trap at the top. I just feel like no matter what you do in this race, it's not going to be right. Vodka with a twist. I mean, you got to go back a long way to find some wins on the resume there. There's one horse in here that fits that same narrative. Tax never wins, it seems like. Did win a 6 furlong sprint at Oaklawn in Allowance Company, but always runs a good race, always comes with a run. And I just kind of trust Tax a little bit more than the others, and I think she's 20-1 in the morning line. Yeah. She's a big price, and I'm going to try to get her in there somewhere. I don't know if she can win the race, and probably the value is getting her on top, not second, and I'm certainly not going to play tries or supers in the 7-horse field. So if she runs second in the exacta behind Zeitlos or Vava, I think I can cash a decent ticket there. If she happens to pull the upset, you might really get something cooking in your all-stakes pick 4 and all-stakes pick 5. A reminder, they're going to have the pick 4s and pick 5s and the pick 6 are going to end in the feature race on Saturday, not the last race on the card. So kind of move all those exotics up into the all-stakes format. And, if you can get Tax in there, you can get some chalk around it and get a nice payoff, in this multi-race bet. I don't like anything in this race. That's the deal. So the one that I trust the most to run pretty decently and is going to give me the odds is Tax. And so I'm going to kind of hold my nose, pick her, and see what happens.
You're going to get your odds, I think, because bettors these days are so focused on the buyers. I think the Tax will offer up some value. But I looked at that one, and I had circled, and one of the reasons I went with Zeitlos over Vava is wins at the distance. And Tax has done okay at 6 furlongs. You look at Vava, though, she's more of a 7 furlong horse. Zeitlos is 7 for 10 at 6 furlongs. But I agree with you. This is one of my least favorite handicapping puzzles. Horses that have kind of back class, but their last 1 or 2 races leave you scratching your chin. And when you get a whole field like that, you're right. You are kind of throwing darts a little bit.
Yeah, and they're fillies and mares too, and they kind of go in and out of form with their cycles and everything like that. So which one's going to wake up and run here? I have no idea. I just don't want to take 2-1 on anybody. It's a tough race. If you're looking at the multi-race bets, I think you got to use Zeitlos, you got to use Baba, and you got to use some others in here because I don't trust either one of them at short prices. You don't want to be too deep with 8-5 and 2-1. So I think this is a race where unfortunately there's only 7. But if you're playing the multi-race wagers, you kind of want to go a little deeper.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. All right, 8th race, the First Lady Grade 1 event. We're looking at the fillies and mares going a mile on the turf. I pulled up a replay here. Again, going back to Saratoga, we're going to watch Dynamic Pricing winning the Perfect Sting. It's a Chad Brown-Klarovich trainee and gets it done again up at Saratoga. that one's interesting to me. I'm going to put another Chad Brown on top. Sagesta, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, coming off a second place finish in the ladies' turf at Kentucky Downs. Won a stake, the matchmaker at Monmouth just before that. Ozara from Miguel Clement comes in off a couple of wins. Then I have dynamic pricing in my mix. If Special Juan gets in for Brendan Walsh off the AE list, I think you have to pay attention to that one. And I will totally admit, I didn't know what to do with the Europeans. But how did you see the First Lady?
Well, this is one of the most interesting facts that I've ever come across. I've been doing this for 30 years, do a lot of stats and trends. It's not that Chad Brown has won this race 7 years in a row that's remarkable. That's pretty remarkable, right?
That is.
None of the 7 were favored. That's the most amazing thing of all.
That's incredible. That is incredible. Yeah.
So what you're looking for in this race is a Chad Brown horse that the public doesn't really think is the better of the two, or will take a chance on someone else. And so dynamic pricing is suggested your 2 top picks in here. Whichever one's looking like the better price of the tote board is the way to go. Chad owns this race, and you can get a price on his horses in these races. He's won the race 8 times overall, the last 7 years straight. And again, none of the 8 have been favored, including winning it 7 years in a row, and nobody's caught on to the right horse. It's just remarkable. It's one of those head scratchers when you kind of go back and look at things. Horses that have run at Saratoga and are cutting back and trip a little bit have done well in this race historically. Neither of Chad's are doing that. They're both coming out of mile races. You know, if you're looking for a horse who's kind of cutting back and trip and, coming out of Saratoga, you don't really have a lot of big options in this particular spot. You do have Heredia cutting back, but Ozara does cut back and distance in here for Miguel Clement. This is a horse out of Saratoga cutting back to trip a little bit. It might be of some interest to some horse players who are trying to fit the trends, if you will, for this particular spot. But this is a really difficult race. There are a lot of good options in here. I thought the one choice that has a shot in here. This is a horse for Simon Crisper. He's been over here stateside 3 starts already this year. Won the Jenny Wiley in the spring over this track, and is cutting back off a Saratoga race last time out in the Diana. The Diana's been a really good race for this race on the cutback over the years. Showed speed in that one and now shortens up. You get Frankie Dettori, you get the rail. You know you like the course. You won the race here in the spring. It's the sister race to this, the Jenny Wiley. And again, the trends kind of say cutting back from Saratoga has been a really good way to go in these races. So I took choice in here, but this is a race where there are a lot of good options. I picked Sagesta second for Chad. And then I threw the 7 Heredia in there as well for Graham Motion. This horse has run really well in 3 starts domestically, and was a Group 1, 6-1 shot in Group 1 company when running in Europe against, in Spiral and all. So this is a horse who's got a ton of back class. Heredia gets a Tyler Gaffleone riding, and he's been outstanding in turf miles at Keeneland. Best turf mile rider at Keeneland specifically, a big ROI positive for Tyler Gaffleone. So I thought this was a good pairing, first time Tyler riding him. I have it 197, and I think he can go a lot of different ways in there.
I totally agree with the horses you looked at as live that I didn't have in my mix, and I totally agree. It's that kind of a race. And I will add, we talked jockeys a little bit with Tory winning at Kentucky Downs. Tyler Gaffleone, how about comes back from the injury and does well at Ellis, and then just wrapped up the Churchill early fall meet with a meet leading title as well. So it's good to see him back and riding very well.
Yeah, because he didn't ride the spring meet at Keeneland, and he's been by far the dominant, leading rider title guy. Luis Saez up there with him over the years, but now the Ortiz brothers kind of went 1-2 in the spring. Pratt actually beat them on the last day by winning 3 or 4, I think, on closing day. So Pratt's the reigning leading rider. You got the Ortiz brothers riding full time there now, and then you add Tyler back into the mix, and Saez is always part of it. That's as strong a fivesome at the top of any jockey leaderboard that you're going to see anywhere, and they're going to get all the big mounts. It's going to be a really dominant set of days for those riders. You're going to see a bunch of those guys winning 2 and 3 repeatedly throughout the season.
And I would love to, be a fly on the wall for when Jose Ortiz heard his brother was going to come to Kentucky for the fall. Because Jose decided to move his family down there outside of Saratoga in some Florida, and he was doing very well down in Kentucky. And then the brother looked over his shoulder and said, "Yeah, I think I'll go down there too." And I'm sure Jose had some mixed feelings about that.
Yeah, but I mean, the purse money's so good in Kentucky now with the historical racing machines that you can see it's changing the racing, right? I mean, we're even seeing it at Keeneland. Your NYRA fans know this, but the stakes took a hit when all this VLT money goes into the purse money, and you're running $150,000 allowance races. And the stronger the allowance races got at Saratoga and Aqueduct, the fewer people that are wanting to put up money and running stakes races and run for third money in $300,000 races when you can win an allowance race and make more money doing so. So it's kind of changed the stakes game. And you're seeing it here at Keeneland. We've got some shorter fields and stakes races that we're not used to seeing, but all that money in the overnight racing, as they call it, and the allowance races and such at Keeneland, the one unintended consequence is that there aren't going to be the depth of horses in some of these stakes races because they've got options to run for money somewhere else.
Yeah, we saw it last week in the Woodward, and I said, oof, that was rough there. Mm-hmm. And then just the news came out, I think it was yesterday, Turfway this winter with their purse structure is kind of knocking it out of the park as well. Yeah, Kentucky is really kind of elevated over the past couple of years in particular. All right, 9th race, Breeders' Futurity. Looking forward to the 2-year-old action this weekend in both Kentucky and New York. But the 2-year-olds face off going 8.5 furlongs. I pulled up a replay of the horse I think everybody's looking forward to off the Hopeful win, and we're going to take a look at the Hopeful. Ted Naufy gets it done off a debut win at Saratoga August 2nd, comes back September 1st, wins the Grade 1 Hopeful in just fine fashion with a 98 buyer. Our friends at West Point, Mark Cassie, have the very talented Ewing, who hasn't been seen since winning early on at Saratoga in the Saratoga Special. He's interesting. Big Dom for Tommy Amos. He's splitting up a couple of his. We have another one of his in the Champagne a little bit later. That highly anticipated. It's our time, but Big Dom will show up here. Spice Runner, I think, is intriguing perhaps for Asmussen if you're looking for a little bit of a price with Gaffleone on board. How did you see the Breeders' Futurity?
It's a good race when you haven't even mentioned Bob Baffert and Litmus Test with Flavian Pratt aboard, right? I mean, there's some, this is a 7-horse field, and we've seen a lot of capacity fields, 12, even I think 14 some years in the Breeders' Futurity, but I don't know that we've had this kind of top heaviness in a Breeders' Futurity in some time. This is a really good group. You got the Saratoga Special winner, you got the Hopeful winner, you got the Iroquois winner from Churchill, and you got the 4th place finisher in the Del Mar Futurity coming east for Baffert and Pratt. So this is a really interesting cast, and like you mentioned, Big Dom impressed a lot of people up in New York. Blackout Time's coming off a big win at Ellis. So this is a really cool group. And then you got a Gulfstream Stakes winner in the 3-horse in here. I think it's the Cassiette is a horse who for Patrick Biancone comes off a stakes win in Open Company down at Gulfstream. So it's really Breeders' Cup juvenile-esque in terms of the regions. You know, you're getting all the regions coming together here a race before the Breeders' Cup. This may not be the top 1, 2, 3 in the Breeders' Cup rankings, but some of them are pretty darn close. I mean, you're not going to find any rankings that will have Ted Naufy right up there, 1, 2, 3, and maybe Ewing's in that same kind of category. You know, he's done absolutely nothing wrong. Ewing is by Knicks Go, and of course, Knicks Go won the Breeders' Futurity at 70-1 odds back as a 2-year-old. If you remember, he won this race, and then later he ended up with Brad Cox, and he came back, won a allowance race over the track at Keeneland in dominant fashion that sent him to the Breeders' Cup Mile, and he won that at Keeneland. So Knicks Go, we're going to see how his horses perform over the track here at Keeneland. If they run as well as he did, that gives Ewing a little bit of a thumbs up. Ted Naufy's the horse to beat, though. You know, Locke, Forte, Carpe Diem, they're all Todd Fletcher trainees who have won this race. He aims for this race, and he's got the right horse here. Stretching out to 2 turns is not a big deal in this race. We've seen it. Horses stretching out have won 7 of the 11 since they've gone back to dirt. So there's not an overemphasis on horses who have route experience. It never hurts to already have the route experience, but the only horse in this race that has gone 2 turns is Blackout Time, and that was kind of the pseudo 2-turn race at Ellis Park, starting on the hook. Spice Runner's gone a mile, but that was 1 turn. So they're all kind of in the same boat, seeing who can handle 2 turns. Ted Naufy's pedigree should handle it up to a mile and 16th, no problem. He's the horse to beat in here, and he's the one I've got on top. But Ewing should give him a good run. Litmus Test is worth a look. You know, his sire Nyquist has done outstanding work. The horses by Nyquist have had fabulous numbers over the main track here at Keeneland as a sire. And, of course, Nyquist, when he won his Breeders' Cup Juvenile, it was here at Keeneland. So not only did he run well over the track, but his horses really, really run well here. I wouldn't be surprised if Litmus Test runs a pretty good race as well. This is a tough one. This is a good race. But Ted Naufy's last race is just better than this.
I totally agree. Ted Naufy is clearly the one to beat. If I was going to play around with the price, it's one that I didn't mention earlier. You tossed it in the mix, though. The maiden winner at Ellis last time out for Kenny McPeak, Blackout Time, because when we're talking about sires, not this time. And certainly, they aforementioned it's our time by not this time. And off that big win at Ellis, at a 10-1 morning line price, again, Ted Naufy to me is the one to beat. But if you're going to play around a little bit, I think the 1 is an interesting entrant in here.
Yeah, with everybody stretching out, and if Ted Naufy's dominant, what usually happens in those races? The horses who are chasing just get discouraged and gassed, and they've never gone around 2 turns, and they just kind of stop running. So a horse with a little bit of route experience who isn't sold on being up near the front, and I don't think he will. I think Kenny's going to say, take back, save some ground, and try to pass horses. He could run second in here. That would actually be a pretty decent exacta play. Ted Naufy over Blackout Time. I wouldn't have any argument with that. And, you know, Kenny's had good success in these races over the years. He won this race with a Rattle and Roll a few years back. He's done well in the Alcibiades historically here. So his 2-year-olds are ready to go along at Keeneland.
Yeah, that was interesting to me. All right, we wrap up the stakes action on Saturday afternoon. Race number 10, the Turf Mile, Grade 1 event for 3-year-olds and up. They will vie for $1.25 million. I pulled up a replay here. I went back to the Bernard Baruch because a couple horses coming out of the 1-2 positions there show up in here. Donegal Momentum will be the winner, and running a close-up second will be Program Trading. I tilted towards, and I say it a lot when I'm in here doing the afternoon handicapping. Sometimes we try to outsmart ourselves and switch up the results from last time. That's what I'm doing here. And oftentimes they come back in exactly the same order. But I'm going to put Program Trading on top. In fact, I did not use Donegal Momentum at all. I have Diego Velasquez in the second. Howard Wolowitz is interesting to me, rhetorical. But again, this is like the earlier turf race. I think you can point to a few in here and make some arguments. How did you see it?
Well, if you're trying to reverse what happened in that race, you try to deconstruct it, right? And then reconstruct it how it will run here. But Baruch at a very slow pace, 49 and change, almost 114 for 6 furlongs. And on the front end, Donegal Momentum was able to win. What's different about this race? Quattro Centro's in here. He's fast early. Howard Wolowitz is fast early. The 1, the 2, and the 3 all have early speed in a turf mile, not a mile and 16. So it's a closer run into the first turn even. So that early speed is going to be used more to hold position. So Donegal Momentum is going to have a much tougher task in this race pace-wise than he did. He might still be good enough to do it, but he's got to work much harder for the front. So that should, like you say, favor the result being flipped in here with Program Trading. Chad Brown won the race last year with Carl Spackler. He'll try to do it again. Program Trading wouldn't be any surprise at all. Second start off the layoff, my favorite start in the form cycle. This horse ran very well in the second career start as well, so you would expect him to run a good one. Diego Velasquez's last race is definitely good enough to win this race. When he was able to beat notable speech over there in the Jacques Marat, which is the top turf mile in all of France and arguably the best turf mile in Europe many years. To beat that horse, Notable Speech, who came back and easily won the Woodbine Mile. We know Notable Speech ran a cracker third last year in the Breeders' Cup Turf Mile. So this is, he's a horse who's really held the team company line. He's inconsistent, as we often see with a lot of the Aidan O'Brien horses. When they don't fire, I mean, you can't find him with the search warrant, but when he does fire, he's awfully good. I would suspect that Diego Velasquez is going to be here with some intention to run well. He's not a Coolmore horse, right? He's owned by the Sangster stable. So this is maybe a situation where they want to get him in front of some breeders, It's not Coolmore where you know what's going to happen with his breeding career. So this might be an audition for him in front of the Kentucky breeding world. We saw Aussie Rules come over here, Landseer come over here for Aidan O'Brien back in the early 2000s and win this race, the Turf Mile. I wouldn't be surprised if Diego Velasquez is here auditioning for a breeding career and puts on a pretty good show. I think he's the best horse in this race, but this is a tough spot in here. John Quilt at 12 is one I think you want to keep an eye on. He's by Lope de Vega, sire who does really, really well over the Keeneland turf. He was the sire of Carl Spackler last year. And look at the odds. I mean, you're running all Group 1s and Group 2s with John Quilt. He's been 3-1, 3-1, and 9-2. I mean, he has been right at the cusp of favoritism in big European races, which I think he's going to be overlooked in this particular spot, and I think there'll be an overlay in here. I also like that all 3 Europeans who are shipping in here basically get local jockeys. That's the best combination. Vittori's going to ride Diego Velasquez, Gaffleone's going to ride Wood Shauna, the 3-year-old coming over, and John Cole gets Dylan Davis. I love the talent of a European horse with an American jockey who's used to riding our style of races and used to the course that they're riding over. I think the Europeans are going to be tough in here, not only on their form, but the fact that they all 3 have U.S.-based jockeys now.
You brought up something that I thought about in the past, and I'd love to see actual numbers on that, but how the European jockeys do when they come over here in these kind of races as compared to a European horse getting an American jockey. It's interesting because I thought just what you said. You team up with the rider who is more used to riding over here. I've always thought, is that a little better? It seems like it.
Yeah, and I even like the same thing when we're just talking about local races, right? So, so it's Charlestown Classic night, right? And somebody ships a horse in and they put the local leading rider on. I like that, and if you're shipping to Remington Park and you're going to get Ramon Vasquez to ride on Oklahoma Derby Day because he's the leading jockey in the standings. I prefer that. Give me the local guy who's winning races and put them on a super talented out-of-town horse. I think that's the right combination. So I think the Europeans are going to be pretty strong in here. And in fact, when I look at multi-race bets in this race, I'm not getting beyond the 4, 12, and 5. I'm going to use the 3 Europeans and just try to get through it with one of them.
All right, very interesting. I'm glad you mentioned Notable Speech. Diego Velasquez beating Notable Speech in the last, because we were up a few weeks ago. We were at Woodbine covering the Woodbine Mile, and Notable Speech looked fabulous for Charles Appleby. Yeah. And then last week, Rebels Romance, I think, looked even better for Charles Appleby.
Well, Rebels Romance is, 7 now or something?
Incredible.
He's just he seems better now than he's been. I mean, he really looks good here this year.
Yeah, so the turf races are shaping up very nicely, Breeders' Cup as well. And as I said earlier, there will be some potent Breeders' Cup horses coming out of the action at Keeneland on Saturday. Yep. Jeremy, appreciate the visit. Again, tell people to check out the Keeneland website for your picks and analysis throughout this spring meet. The night before, the YouTube previews as well, highly recommended. But we appreciate the visit, and we'll probably check in again before the meet ends.
Sounds good. Good luck, everybody.
Appreciate it. Jeremy Plonk, CoursePlayerNow.com. And as I said, you can find him on the Keeneland website with selections and analysis. And do check out the YouTube previews the night before each racing day at Keeneland as well. All right, we'll take a break. Back shortly. Stay tuned.
You know the time is now. What you waiting for? The time is now. Here's knocking at the door. The time is now. Do you want to give them more when the time is now? You've seen the best now. You want the best when the time is now.
구리아코 출발합니다.
이 순간을 위해 여기까지 달려왔다. 이제 내일을 향해 뛴다.
Want to get your career in horse racing off to a fast start? Well, the University of Arizona's Racetrack Industry Program is your winning ticket. The Racetrack Industry Program has served as a springboard to some of the industry's most successful individuals, with a proven track record of job placement right out of college. If you want to earn a degree in the exciting horse racing industry, the Racetrack Industry Program can put you in the winner's circle.
Welcome back to Racing Across America on this Saturday morning. Again, pre-taped, so I'm coming to you from Thursday. So if I mention some horses that maybe become late scratches or whatnot, I apologize for that. But had a great conversation with Jeremy Plonk about the Keeneland Stakes. But as I mentioned earlier, it's a great stakes day at Belmont as well. But we also did mention Forever Young, who on Wednesday had his comeback race in Japan. So we'll take a look at that. Forever Young's the number 7 horse. You can see coming out of the gate. And early on, it's interesting. The camera kind of forgets the front runners early on and goes right to Forever Young. But you can see, and it was mentioned, some folks on Twitter mentioned it. Jeremy mentioned it looked like the track was kind of sandy and loose. And early on, it seemed like Forever Young was reacting to the kickback. But then settles in and gets his run and run down the backstretch. And we'll see in the stretch, eventually he pushes on by. I said it earlier. I'm not sure how strong the field was. And this is just an interesting schedule this year. Earlier this year, he won the race in Saudi. He was third in the Dubai World Cup. And they pretty much said after the Dubai World Cup, we're going to go to the sidelines. So he's been off since the Dubai World Cup. Had the comeback on Wednesday, which was, again, a winning effort. It was a Group 2, Grade 2, I believe, in Japan. So as I say, not sure about the field. Last year, he came out of a different race in Japan to head to the Breeders' Cup, where, again, he ran a very close-up third. But that race this year, I think the Japan Cup, but whatever the race was, last year it was this week. This year, that race is next week. So they chose this race on Wednesday for the timing. And, it was obviously a winning prep, but it's going to be interesting to see. Again, a very unique schedule, as I say, one earlier this year in Saudi, then Dubai, a third. We go back to last year, had that win in Saudi over Buckham Dano, and ran well in Dubai, and then third in the Kentucky Derby, third in the Breeders' Cup Classic, and comes into this year, again, with a unique schedule with a layoff from the March in Dubai until Wednesday, and he's going to come into the Breeders' Cup off of that comeback effort. We'll see what he can do. But he just adds another piece of intrigue to the Breeders' Cup Classic puzzle this year. But I wanted you to take a look at that race, given that he will be a horse that will have some kind of buzz just because he's Forever Young. He'll have some buzz going into the Breeders' Cup Classic. So wanted people to be able to see the comebacker again. That was this past Wednesday in Japan. But as mentioned, it's a big stakes day at Belmont at the Big A. So I didn't want to get away from the morning without mentioning some of the action this afternoon in New York. The stakes action will kick off with the Jockey Club Derby Invitational, a mile and 3/8 on the turf. Part of that series of the earlier, is it the Belmont Derby? But it's the Saratoga Derby Invitational, and then this one as well. Grade 2 event, $500,000 up for grabs. I will say, this is not a particularly inspiring field. I'm just looking. I don't think anybody's coming out of a win here. And in fact, I think you have to search down at least, well, Noble Confessor 2 starts back. but everybody else, you're going at least 3 starts back to find a win. Noble Confessor for Todd Pletcher had a maiden break or 2 back up at Saratoga, and off of that, they tried the very rich Nashville Derby down at Kentucky Downs, wound up 6th in there. So again, you're a little bit searching around. Hill Road for Chad Brown, 3rd in that Nashville Derby. Before that, 3rd in the Jim Dandy. Nashville Derby was the first try on the turf. So I say it a lot. You get into the summertime and you get some of these 3-year-olds who are trying the big guns in some of the big 3-year-old races earlier in the year on the dirt. And you get into the summer and they'll try a turf race. They maybe have a class edge. They have to take to the turf, but they maybe have a little bit of a class edge. So Hill Road, again, coming out of 2, 3, 4 starts back, Jim Dandy, Belmont, Peter Pan. 3rd in the Nashville Derby, maybe is a little bit interesting in here, as I say, with perhaps some back classes of 3-year-old. Ashbury Park for Chad Brown, Peter Brandt and company, lately raced. Only 1 win, the maiden breaker, was 3rd last time up at Saratoga in the Saranac, 4th in the Saranac. Crudo, who tried the turf after, again, having faced some of the bigger players on the 3-year-old scene, and the Keeneland, the Belmont, the Sir Barton, won the Sir Barton at Pimlico. But again, this race is a little bit of a puzzle. It is not a strong group, so you're maybe going for a little back class because the recent starts for virtually all of these are not jumping off the page necessarily. But again, that's the Jockey Club Invitational, race number 4 on Saturday afternoon. Race number 6 on Saturday afternoon. The Frazette, 2-year-old fillies going the 1-turn mile. The interesting horse in here is probably Iron Orchard for Danny Garrigan. New York bred that is 2 for 2 and 2 solid victories. Maiden breaker up at Saratoga and then went into Seeking the Ante, New York bred stake. Now, they were both sprints, stretches out. I kind of like that. A couple of sprints and then you stretch out. Still 1 turn, but it's a 1-turn mile. So that one to me is interesting. Tommy Joe, who went to Keeneland, was the winner of the spinaway, but 3rd in the spinaway was Riley Tolle, who may be a little bit interesting for Safi Joseph. Safi also has Sikane, I'm guessing, for Safi Joseph, coming out of a maiden breaker and debut down at Gulfstream, but with a number that's not great, but matches up with this group. Lovely Christina, a Vacoma filly for Todd Pletcher. A couple of nice starts. 2nd in the debut up at Saratoga, won the 2nd start. I can see that one being interesting. He also has Steer Clear, same scenario. 2nd in debut, won the 2nd start. 5 Bars by Maxfield, who is becoming an interesting sire. 5 Bars goes out for Shug. It's really a race where, as you look at the field, you can kind of make some kind of a case for most of these. I didn't mention Carmel Coast. I said the horse to pay attention to, maybe Iron Orchard, because Iron Orchard has a little bit of a resume with the New York bred stakes victory. Carmel Coast, though, a debut winner for Whit Beckman up at Saratoga with a solid 86 buyer. And that has the edge on this group, including Iron Orchard by a few points. So Carmel Coast is going to take a lot of action as well. Those 2 are probably the 2 that are interesting to me in here, although some of these others could come out being interesting if they step it up and starts 2 or 3. But Iron Orchard and Carmel Coast in the Frazette. In the Champagne may be the interesting race of the day, really anywhere, but certainly in New York with It's Our Time in here for Tommy Amos. The Saratoga meet ended, and Saratoga, a lot of the interest at Saratoga's 2-year-old races, and It's Our Time was just fabulous. We'll take a look here at the debut effort, the stretch run for It's Our Time up at Saratoga, and this was just devastating. And the buyer coming out, 94. The horse had a little trouble at the start, and as I say, the end of the meet, you point back to some of the 2-year-old performances, Bookham Dano and Sovereignty and whatnot, but Saratoga always has 1 or 2 or 3 2-year-olds people are talking about. Well, the one they were talking about this year was It's Our Time for Tommy Amos. He picked this spot as the next start. Everybody is going to be absolutely intrigued to see what It's Our Time does in the Champagne. Curtain call for Mark Cassie, 3rd in the Hopeful behind Ted Noffey. McPeak has Universe coming in off the debut win up at Saratoga. Again, a 68 buyer as compared to It's Our Time's 94. But horses can always improve and improve significantly in their 2nd start. Can they move up, 20-some, high 20-some, 30-some points? We shall see. Just ASAP comes in off a 2nd in the Sapling last time for Mark Cassie with a pretty good number. And that one's by the aforementioned Maxfield. Stick Up Without a Gun. I don't know if I want to mention this one because in the debut effort at 16-1, I like Stick Up Without a Gun as my dark horse play of the day that day. And then I jumped off, ran sixth in the debut. And then I jumped off and start number 2. And the Harold Lerner, Kenny McPeak runner gets it done at 9-1. And so that was a little bit frustrating there. Napoleon Solo, a debut winner for Chad Summers and Gold Square Racing with a pretty good 83 buyer. So it's talking as a debut victory with an 82 buyer for Dean Reeves and Company and Danny Gargan. Fun race, definitely, but all eyes clearly on It's Our Time in the Champagne. And then in the Miss Grillo on the grass for the 2-year-old fillies. Nice full field in here. And again, it's another one of those where I don't know whether anybody totally jumps off the page. Philly Dioro for Brad Cox. Pretty solid 77 buyer in the debut victory up at Saratoga. Miss Picky comes in with the 77 buyer maiden breaking win for Todd Pletcher. A couple of mid-70 buyers for the Belmont runner, Quiet Street. One was at Saratoga, and one was a win in the stake down at Kentucky Downs. That horse will certainly take a lot of action, but again, a nice full field, stuck on the outside going 2 turns. So we will see, have to negotiate a little bit of a trip. But again, nice full field in there, certainly a nice betting event in the 8th, Belmont at the Big A, the Miss Grillo. So as I say, a very, very nice day of stakes action, really all around. Let me hit you with some of the other news. There will be a cross-country pick 5 today that will include both Keeneland and Belmont. It will start in Belmont race 7. We'll go to Keeneland race 6, Belmont race 8, Belmont at the Big A, Keeneland 7, Keeneland 8. So again, there's a cross-country pick 5 combining both Keeneland and Belmont at the Big A. You can go to NYRA.com. They have free PPs for that cross-country pick 5 as well. This was interesting news that came out. I'll mention it also as we get closer to this, certainly. But Delta Downs, normally nighttime, an evening card. I think their normal post time is 5 o'clock-ish for their time zone. They're in the central time zone. But they have a handful of afternoon cards coming up in November and December. November 25th, November 26th, December 22nd, 23rd, 29th, and 30th. They'll all kick off at either noon or just before 1 o'clock. And again, we'll talk more about this as dates get closer, but I just found it interesting. They came out with the news that for those daytime cards, the 5 of the, the 6, for the 6 daytime cards coming up November and December at Delta Downs, the takeout is going to be 10% across the board on every wager, it sounds like. Win, play, show, and the exotic. It says that's the press release. That's all pools, 10%. And there are a lot of bettors out there, understandably, who point to takeout, and I totally agree. There are some bets at some venues around the country where it gets to be a little egregious. But I will be interested to see if a lot of bettors jump in on this 10% because it's unprecedented. And so we'll see what Delta Downs does. Again, later in November and then in December, 10% takeout on virtually all the bets. So it was interesting news when that came out. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. A little bit of an abbreviated edition of Racing Across America. Again, I'm actually out of town, so this was pre-taped a couple of days ago, but I didn't want to let the morning get away without talking some Keeneland and some Belmont at Aqueduct with 2 really big stakes days that, again, will clearly play into the Breeders' Cup in the various divisions. So looks like a great day of racing ahead. Enjoy it. I'll be back in midweek for my out-of-town trip, so we look forward to joining you then and taking a look at the upcoming few weeks of racing, which will include, obviously, this nice fall Keeneland meet, which kicks off this weekend and more. So, again, enjoy the racing this afternoon throughout the weekend. I'll be back in on Wednesday with OTB Live, so we'll see you then.
We'd like to thank Woodbine for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Woodbine open now through December, featuring great racing, including the King's Plate coming up in August, Turf Champions Day with the Woodbine Mile in September, and much, much more. Woodbine Racing, great racing north of the border.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off-Track Betting.